Alright, so guys, I am out sick today, so I'm going to record this short lecture, so all 4 classes should hear this today. The first thing we're going to kind of review is America and Asia and Latin America, and how does the American position in the Pacific create power and trade opportunities for the United States. Most of this should be review for you. We've already been talking about it pretty extensively. Here's a map of Asia. This shows you kind of the position of the Philippines, its proximity to China right here, and Japan up here. So you can see why the United States would really be excited about having a naval base in the Philippines. It gives them a great position to trade with India, with Australia, with China, Japan. So in many ways, it is kind of their South Pacific base. All the other islands that they have, that they've acquired, Hawaii, Samoa, Guam, those are more like naval bases, stopovers on the way to get to the Philippines. The Philippines will essentially be a base of operations in the South Pacific. This will be true all the way through World War II. Remember that China, the big problem there was spheres of influence from European powers, and the fact that the United States wanted to have its foot in the door. Hence the open door policy for trading rights. That's a huge reason. There's no mistaking that policy really comes about in 1899 after the Spanish-American War and after we've acquired the Philippines. You see the Boxer Rebellion that takes place a few years later, where there are some Chinese peasants try to rise up and push out foreign influences. That is not successful, and you see Teddy Roosevelt reasserting the policy of open door in China, of course without regard to what China wants. Japan had been incredibly isolationist until Matthew Perry shows up, and he kind of wedges the United States into trade with Japan in the 1850s. Japan rapidly industrializes after this, so much so that by 1894 they've defeated China. By 1905 they've defeated Russia, and so they are a real significant threat in the South Pacific. So Theodore Roosevelt will negotiate the peace treaty between Russia and Japan, wins the Nobel Peace Prize, but make no mistake, he's doing this in order to reassert American power in the South Pacific. There's no wonder why he sends the Great White Fleet all over the South Pacific to remind Japan that, hey, we're pretty strong and you don't want to mess with us. Caribbean's the other area that you see the United States being very active in. This is a quick map of the Caribbean. You can see here's Cuba. Remember, we don't actually have Cuba as a territory. Cuba is technically independent, but we have essentially a protectorate in Cuba, where we control who's in charge, we control the Constitution, and that stays true really, officially till 1934, but really until the 1950s when Castro rises up and kicks the United States out. The other area that we have is this little island over here, Puerto Rico. That is still a territory, and I believe nowadays the U.S. has some significant influence in the Virgin Islands as well. But after the Spanish-American War, it's Puerto Rico that we get. And this serves very much as a naval base, as does Cuba, on the way to having influence in South America and Central America. This cartoon right here shows you these 4 children in the front that Uncle Sam is schooling, so to speak, represent the 4 territories. Notice they're including Cuba in that, although Cuba is technically independent. So we've got Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico. And you see Uncle Sam trying to teach about democracy, trying to teach them how to run a country, and these students back here are represented, or represent rather, the other United States that Uncle Sam's in control of. Cuba, again, Congress passes a resolution before the Spanish-American War not to annex Cuba, and so it's a protectorate. The Platt Amendment is what allows the United States to have such an extensive degree of control in Cuba. And like I said, this will play a bigger role when we get to the 1950s and 1960s, when Castro rises up, and then in the 1960s with the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Panama Canal, another major development in the Caribbean. Obviously, if we have islands here in the Caribbean and islands over in the Pacific, we need a shortcut to get through, and that's through this Isthmus of Panama. And you can see right here a couple of maps of Panama that give you an idea for how important this area was in moving from one ocean to the other. President Roosevelt tries to negotiate with Colombia. Colombia refuses. So you have Roosevelt basically supporting a revolution in Panama to gain control of a 10-mile strip of land. Again, Roosevelt's very heavy-handed approach towards global or foreign policy. This is just some pictures of building the Panama Canal. If you remember from that video I showed you a couple weeks ago about that process of locks, how they move a ship in, and then they drain the water out, and the ship goes into another lock, and that kind of thing. It takes 10 years to complete the Panama Canal. Different elevations, and these series of locks are designed by engineers to address the different elevations going through Panama. The big thing is going to be how to reduce the spread of yellow fever and how to control malaria. And you can see Dr. Walter Reed and Dr. William Gorgas are significant in learning how to control those, the draining of swamps. And this is a huge medical advancement. So the Panama Canal is important not only for its engineering feats, but also for its medical feats. Geographic impact, clearly the Panamanian Revolution and independent Panama. The U.S. Basically divides Panama with the Canal Zone, and Jimmy Carter will return the Canal Zone in 1999. Physical factors, Canal Zone is 48 miles long and saves about 8,000 miles round trip. So it's a huge, huge development in global power because of the speed with which it lets the United States travel. President Roosevelt's foreign policy can be summed up as the Roosevelt corollary. Speak softly, carry a big stick. And this cartoon says it all. Teddy Roosevelt representing the United States as the world policeman, using its baton, which is its military and its navy, to control populations and keep the peace and maintain stability. Roosevelt was a big fan of stability at home and abroad. And the difference was at home he tended to use negotiation and a lot of talk and a lot of regulation, and his foreign policy involved a lot of military action. President Taft, who did not like so much the military action of Teddy Roosevelt, he instead goes to dollar diplomacy, encouraging American investment in the Caribbean. You can see this one cartoon says patting the big stick with American dollars, and this cartoon right here kind of shows you the impact of dollar diplomacy with these foreign countries and the United States spending money trying to dress up Uncle Sam, so to speak, make Uncle Sam look better. And what will happen, though, unfortunately, is that dollar diplomacy, because it has so much investment in the Caribbean, it will actually use its military to collect debts, to protect businesses. And so while dollar diplomacy was meant to keep the military from being too in charge, what ends up happening is that the military is very active. President Wilson has a policy of what we call watchful waiting. He doesn't like using the military either. However, as we'll see, especially because he's the president during World War I, he is very active in using the military whenever he needs to. So his policy is watchful waiting. Let's wait and see how things develop. But the result is that he's going to send troops into Haiti, Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic to protect American business interests. And he's going to use the military very much as kind of like a strong man, kind of like the gangsters. You know, they're going to send some visitors to you. And that's what happens. You see that he purchases the Virgin Islands, expanding the colonial empire. And he even sends troops into Mexico to put down rebels led by Pancho Villa. So him sending the troops into Mexico is a pretty significant aggressive action. Now this happens before World War I, so we'll be going into this in a little more detail, but just know that for all that President Wilson claimed he wasn't about the military, he ends up doing so quite frequently. And so you just want to kind of have a picture of that. So that's it as far as kind of your recap. Now you will be going into doing the finishing up in first and fifth period if you have the imperialist arguments or playing the Kahoot. If you're in 2B or 3B, you're going to start your imperialist arguments and get those finished. Follow the instructions on the handout. It's very clear. Everything will be shared with you in Edmodo, so you should be able to follow that. Be sure you do the map at the bottom, and you need to have call-out boxes or a list that explains the reasons for or against why they would want the Philippines, for or against why they would want Hawaii, for or against why they would want Puerto Rico, and the few other colonies that are listed there. All right, hopefully I will see you tomorrow.